world remembers the names printed in history books, the inventors, the leaders, the heroes. But sometimes, the person who changes the world forever dies alone, while someone else takes the credit. And this is the story of one forgotten genius, a man whose ideas powered an entire generation, a man nobody thanked. And the cruelest part, he never even realized history was leaving him behind. In the winter of 1974, a thin man named Elias Mercer sat inside a tiny workshop behind an old repair shop on the edge of town. The roof leaked when it rained, the heater barely worked, and every night, long after the streets went silent, the yellow light inside his workshop stayed on. Elias was not famous, not rich, not important. At least, that's what everyone believed. During the day, he repaired broken radios and clocks for neighbors who barely looked him in the eye. Some paid late, some never paid at all. But at night, Elias built impossible things. Tiny machines covered his wooden table. Wires curled across the floor like sleeping snakes. Pages of handwritten equations filled entire shelves. People called him strange. Children laughed when they passed his shop. Even his own brother once told him, "You're wasting your life chasing ideas nobody cares about." Elias only smiled quietly, because inside his mind lived a vision so powerful. It kept him awake for years. A machine that could change communication forever. But nobody listened. Not then. Not yet. Every morning, Elias woke at exactly 5:30. Coffee, old notebook, work. He lived carefully, like a man trying not to disturb the world around him. The only person who truly spoke to him was an elderly woman named Martha, who owned the bakery nearby. Every evening, she brought him leftover bread. "You need real food," she'd complain. And Elias would laugh softly. "You need customers who don't argue over 50 cents. Martha was the only one who noticed the sadness behind his eyes, because Elias carried something heavy. Years earlier, his wife Clara had died suddenly from illness. After that, he stopped attending gatherings, stopped smiling as much, stopped believing people could understand him. Instead, he buried himself in invention. Sometimes grief doesn't make people cry. Sometimes it makes them disappear into work. And Elias disappeared completely. But what happened next changed everything. One rainy evening, a black car stopped outside his workshop. Two men stepped out wearing expensive coats, untouched by the rain. One of them introduced himself as Victor Hale, a businessman from the city. Smooth voice, perfect smile, sharp eyes that noticed everything. Victor had heard rumors about Elias. "People say you've built something extraordinary." Elias hesitated. Nobody had ever asked seriously before. Victor stepped closer to the cluttered table. "What if I told you the world is finally ready?" Those words broke something open inside Elias. For the first time in years, someone believed him. Or at least, that's what he thought. Weeks passed. Victor returned again and again. He listened carefully while Elias explained his ideas. Portable digital communication, wireless transmission improvements, compact processing systems far ahead of their time. Most people in 1974 couldn't even understand half of what Elias described. But Victor nodded constantly, impressed, interested, encouraging. "You're a genius," he said one night, and Elias nearly cried hearing it, because sometimes a lonely person doesn't need money first. Sometimes they just need someone to finally see them. Victor offered a partnership. He promised investors, factories, recognition, a future. All Elias had to do was hand over his designs temporarily so they could secure patents and funding. Martha warned him immediately. "That man smiles too much." Elias laughed. "You're suspicious of everyone." "No," she whispered. "Only people who talk like they already own something." But Elias ignored her, because hope can blind people faster than desperation ever could. He signed the papers, and he didn't know this would be the last time he truly owned his life's work. Months passed, then silence. Victor stopped visiting. Calls went unanswered. Letters disappeared. At first, Elias made excuses. "He's busy. The investors are probably negotiating. There must be delays." But deep down, fear slowly began crawling through him. Then one morning, everything shattered. Martha burst into his workshop, holding a newspaper. Her hands trembled. "Elias." On the front page was Victor Hale, standing beside a polished machine, smiling proudly beneath a headline that read, "The invention that will change human communication forever." Elias stared at the photo without breathing. His machine, his designs, his ideas, everything. Victor called himself the inventor, the creator, the visionary. Elias felt the room tilt sideways. "No," he whispered. Martha looked ready to cry, but Elias didn't. Not yet, because some pain is too large for tears at first. It simply empties you. He traveled to the city the next day carrying notebooks full of proof. Security guards refused to let him inside the company building. Victor never came down. Lawyers later claimed the signed documents transferred ownership legally. Elias had trusted papers he barely understood, because geniuses are not always wise about people, and clever men often lose to cruel ones. Weeks turned into months. Victor became famous. Television interviews, magazine covers, award ceremonies. The world celebrated him as a revolutionary mind. Meanwhile, Elias returned to fixing broken radios. Only now, something inside him had broken too. Customers noticed he spoke less, moved slower, forgot simple things. At night, he sat alone in darkness instead of working. The workshop became quiet, too quiet. One evening, Martha found him staring at an unfinished machine. "You should fight," she told him. Elias shook his head weakly. "No one believes in invisible people." Those words stayed with her forever. Years passed. Victor became richer than anyone imagined. His technology spread across countries. People called him one of the greatest innovators alive. And Elias, the real inventor, faded quietly into poverty. Then came the twist nobody expected. A young journalist named Daniel Reed began investigating Victor's past after noticing inconsistencies in old interviews. Victor could describe business strategies perfectly, but whenever conversations became technical, he became vague, careful, almost rehearsed. Daniel grew suspicious. Then he found Elias Mercer. At first, Elias refused to speak. "What's the point?" he asked. Daniel noticed stacks of notebooks covered in dates years before Victor's patents existed. Detailed sketches, working calculations, prototype failures, everything. Proof. The deeper Daniel looked, the darker the truth became. Victor hadn't just stolen one invention. He had built an empire by stealing from forgotten minds no one would defend. But Elias was the masterpiece, the genius whose work created the foundation of modern communication systems. Daniel published the story. At first, nobody believed it. Then former employees began talking. Secret documents surfaced. Old witnesses came forward. The world slowly realized the impossible truth. Their hero was a fraud, and the real genius had been living forgotten behind a repair shop all along. News crews flooded the town. Reporters surrounded Elias everywhere. People suddenly called him brilliant, visionary, legendary. But something heartbreaking had already happened. The recognition came too late. Years of loneliness had already carved deep wounds into him. The world finally saw Elias Mercer, but it saw an exhausted old man, not the dreamer he once was. One night, Daniel visited him privately. "You changed history," Daniel said softly. Elias looked down at his trembling hands. "I only wanted someone to believe me before it was over." Silence filled the room. Then Elias smiled sadly. "Funny, isn't it? What is? The world spent years listening to my inventions without ever hearing my voice." A few weeks later, Elias passed away quietly in his sleep. No grand final speech, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. But this time, the silence was different because the truth had finally escaped. Thousands attended his funeral. People carried flowers past the tiny workshop where history had secretly been rewritten decades earlier. Martha stood near the back holding tears she could no longer hide, and Daniel placed one of Elias' notebooks beside the coffin. Inside the first page, written in faded ink, were words Elias had written long before the world knew his name. Great ideas are fragile, not because they are weak, but because the world often ignores them until someone else claims them. Today, most people don't remember Victor Hale. His statues were removed, his awards stripped away. But Elias Mercer, the forgotten genius, his name is now taught in universities. Documentaries tell his story, and somewhere, in museums filled with glowing technology, children stare at inventions born from a lonely man in a leaking workshop, a man who changed the future without recognition until the very end. And maybe that's the saddest truth about history. Sometimes the people who shape the world are not the loudest, not the richest, not the most celebrated. Sometimes they are the quiet souls working alone in forgotten rooms, hoping someone will finally notice before it's too late. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more stories that feel real.